The mining industry stands at a crucial crossroads where the traditional practices meet the present demands of a sustainable future. The question isn't just about what we mine, but how we mine. Today's guest is a leader who's actively shaping the future of sustainable mining. Makete Thema is the General Manager of Tailings and Remining South Africa at Fraser Alexander, where he also serves as an Executive Director and Board Member. His commitment to sustainability and excellence has earned him numerous accolades, including an environmental award and recognition among Mail and Guardian's top 200 young South Africans. As a United Nations Young SDG innovator and one of the top 30 young African leaders in mining, he's helping shape the future of the industry. In today's episode, Makete shares his insights on future-proofing the mining sector, implementing sustainable practices, and addressing the global demand for responsible resource extraction. Makete, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Look, let's talk about your personal background, your upbringing right up to you entering the industry.
Thank you very much. My upbringing, I was born and bred in Limpopo, Kitwakoga Matlala. I was raised in the rural areas, grew up herding cattle, living rent-free, no issues. And, went through high school in the province as well. Went to Oppenheimer, which was one of the famous high schools there. Didn't really make it to matric, had to be moved to another high school, which is Pex College. Finished my matric, and then I, then moved to the best university in the country, Wits University. And I did my mining engineering degree there. And how I chose mining was when I was in grade 10. The Department of Minerals and Energy, it was called at the time, had a program of, Learners Focus Week in mining. So they'll choose the best grade 10 maths and science students across the province, and had them in Hoedspruit at a lodge for a whole week. And you get presentations from different companies about mining and, what the companies were doing. So it really, arose my interest in mining, at that time. But mining was my third choice when I was in matric, going to university. And the first choice was sectoral science because I was quite good at maths, and I also heard that you could make a lot of money. The second choice was electrical engineering, which was part of my favorite part of physical science in high school. Mining was the third choice because, from that Learners Focus Week in mining, I had some interest, but also, the BE laws that came in 2004. There was an excitement, people were becoming instant billionaires, there were a lot of BE deals going around. And there was this big excitement around mining and, how, people that previously didn't have a role to play or were not allowed to participate in the mining as shareholders, etc., started getting a chance. So I thought, listen, maybe I can become also a billionaire in the future. And, started mining, and I, looking back, it was not such a bad idea. The industry has really paid back, the decision that I made those many years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, you've achieved a lot at a relatively young age, if I may say that. I mean, you're currently sitting as an executive and board of your current organization, that's Fraser Alexander. You did some studies in Oxford and Harvard. You are part of the Innovator Program for the United Nations SDG program. That's the Sustainability Development Goals one. You were top 200 Mail and Guardian, top 200 young South Africans. And currently you are named mining's top 30 young African leaders. This is just to mention a few, over and above the role of general manager that you hold at your organization. This is such a great achievement, Makete, I must say. And how does it feel to have these accolades named against you, and what inspires you and drove you to achieve these accolades?
No, thanks. Look, in my view, it's really been a community of support around me. Right from my family, all the way to colleagues and people who taught me how to mine, and all the way to industry people that I look up to, coaches and mentors over the years. So it's really been a collective effort of people that have intentionally been supporting me, that have been working with me over the years. And with that support and teamwork, one has been able to achieve some of these accolades that you mentioned. So, to me, yes, it's my name attached to these titles, but it's actually a community of people that have really contributed in making, some of these accolades possible. But look, we have not arrived at all. There's just so many challenges ahead of us. But I believe we are the generation that should really shift the dial and make this industry as sustainable, so that the future, of African mining and the future of South Africa can be bright. Because we are mining responsibly and we are mining in a sustainable way.
Absolutely. Talking about the challenges in the future, you are an advocate for sustainability. Maybe talk to us about what that is about and how it came about.
Yeah. No. So I spent, I was blessed to spend 13 years of my life clocking in and clocking out at a mine, drilling and blasting rocks. Which is what I believe is the heartbeat of the mining industry. The winning of minerals, the operations, the employees. Those are the key stakeholders. Including the communities, etc. So, in that 13 years, I started growing an interest in understanding what is the bigger impact of mining beyond, the mine boundaries, and that's where sustainability interest came in. And looking at our legacy at South Africa, where, our legacy is not covered in glory. There's so many ghost towns in the country. There's a lot of mines that have been left, without any proper closure process followed. So with all of that, one started growing an interest in understanding how can we contribute more to ensure that the mining footprint, is not as big as it is now as we mine going forward. But also look back at how we can redress some of the issues that have come out of the history of mining in South Africa. So that's really what ignited my interest in working towards ensuring that mining doesn't only benefit a few, but it becomes, more beneficial even to people, who's mining, who are neighbors to these mining operations, and becomes a real engine for economic growth, which is inclusive.
Yeah, look, looking back at the roles that you held in your career, I mean, it definitely did shape your perspective on sustainable mining. Which part in the journey really made you start being conscious of how we mine?
I think probably, when I was not going underground so often, probably when I became a mine manager, and at the time you start seeing a bigger picture. I think that's probably around 2018, 2019. You start seeing the business picture, and you start realizing that, there's so many stakeholders. You start engaging a lot more with stakeholders within the operations, outside the operations. You start being involved in the, the business side of mining. So that's when I really started having a lot of interest around, the mining and its impact, in the community. And also, being involved also actively in some of the industry associations like the SAIMM. You get exposed to these things and understand that there's actually, a lot that needs to be done for us to redress some of the challenges that, the industry is facing, but also some of the legacy problems that we have, where, society's view of mining is based on what happened in the last, 100 odd years. And, how do we fix that? You obviously can't fix a 100-year-old problem, overnight. So it will need a concerted approach to address and start gaining trust again from society, so that we can still maintain, a social license to operate, because we need to mine more. We need to mine more.
So look, it's quite clear that leaders today need to have a clear view of what the future of mining is, so that they can lead effectively today. What do you think is the things that the leaders today should be focusing on, so that we don't compromise our future in the industry?
Yeah, so I think the first big one is, it's people development. We are talking a lot about transitioning the industry, transitioning, from, towards renewable energy, transitioning towards critical minerals. All of that, those changes and the transition that is required will need a different set of skills. We talk about transitioning to an industry that, achieves zero harm. You need a different kind of mind, to what we have today. More mechanized, more automated, to be able to get closer to the goal of zero harm. We've come a long way, in many respects, in terms of, safety, for example, where we've gone from, in the last 31 years, we've improved safety by, 91%. We went from 484 fatalities in South Africa. Last year, we're at a record low of 42. But 42 is still a lot, and it's still unacceptable. So I think that, just looking back, at what needs to be done. So firstly is people. We need to really focus on getting people future ready, because the transition that's going to happen will be based on people's ability to transition as well. There's no transition that's going to happen without the people in the industry transitioning. And that includes, young people, that includes integrating young people and training them for the future of the industry. The traditional methods that we had in the past, the graduate programs that we had in the past, might fall short, if we just follow the similar approach that we had in the past, because today the skills that a mining engineer needs are a little bit more different, because the requirements are different. Things such as ESG in the last decade have really gained traction. We're talking about social license to operate. We're talking about social benefit. We're talking about policies around mining. So you need a lot more in your toolbox as a mining engineer today. Or as a young person that wants to go into the industry. You need a lot more skills today to survive in this industry, than what it used to be. And for the industry to change and to transform, we are going to need skills. So skills is one. The second thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be collaboration. For a long time, mining is, there's always been a power play. You would have a lot more power sitting probably on the investor side. And over time, that did not really work out very well, because the returns, yes, there might be a return on investment for the investors, but we have seen and paid some heavy fines for not giving back enough to the communities. And, and I think our governments, regulators have seen this as well. So the stakeholders need to unite. The stakeholders, and I'm talking all the way from your investors to communities to government, even to activist groups. We need to unite and, find ways that this mineral endowment that we have in South Africa and Africa at large, becomes a beacon, of, propelling this continent and our country to a prosperous future. So we need that alignment, among stakeholders, and leaders in mining will have to intentionally build those relationships. You'll have to, we can't have a situation where, we've got headquarters somewhere in Joburg, and we are mining in a community in Limpopo somewhere, and there's no connection between where the company is going and the fortunes of that community. So it's going to be very important that we intentionally fix those relationships, including the labor relations, because that's also part of leadership. And also the third point is the industry linkages. We're talking a lot, and beneficiation has been flavor of the last decade and a half probably. And one of the big challenges with beneficiation is that, for a mining company, there must be an incentive to beneficiate. Because if a mining company, if it costs a mining company less to export than to benefit in the country, business sense says, export and earn foreign exchange, earn your forex. So we need to make it attractive for companies to beneficiate. And unfortunately, recently we've had the stories of one of our leading, steel making companies in the country that was closing its doors in the Vanderbilt areas and so forth. There's also news about some ferrochrome smelters that are closing down. And, issues that are cited are, issues such as electricity prices, the cost of doing business in South Africa, etc. So we need to make it an effort to ensure that it becomes cheaper to process raw materials locally, so that we can achieve this value addition that we talk about. Because on the mining value chain, there's actually more value towards the final product, than with the raw material. So unfortunately, we end up having to export because the value chain is not well capacitated, and the environment does not doesn't allow for manufacturing to take place. Because if you really want to supply the manufacturing industry with chrome, or chrome, for example, it must make sense to them. It must be, the environment must make sense for them to be able to set up these plants and manufacture. And you must make it in such a way that we can industrialize, and this can become demand. We can generate demand locally. And if there's demand, the price will go up, and then we can compete with with the global industry in terms of buying our output from mining. So that's the third part. The industry linkages, industrialization, is so important. And of course, it goes with infrastructure, which will now need some reforms and then some policy alignment on how do we actually achieve this. The last point is, the industry also needs to focus on exploration. We need, that's the the grassroots of mining is to go and find the minerals. We know they are there because we've been mining them, but we need to understand what we've got. And I also always make the argument that although Africa has got 30% of the world's known mineral reserves, I think if we really had an intensive exploration program, we might find that we've got a lot more. We just don't know. So exploration is the fourth leg that I think we should focus on for us to really bring back the fire in the industry and have mining increasing its contribution to the GDP, not only of South Africa but also of the continent as a whole, because we really need that impact.
Sure. Let's talk about your role now at Fraser Alexander as the General Manager for Tailings Management and Remining in South Africa. I think we hardly ever talk about remining. Yeah. We always talk about take out the gold, do the coal, and. But you are in charge of remining in South Africa and tailings management. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So what we do, our purpose as Fraser Alexander is that we transform mine waste into societal, environmental, and economic value.
Sure.
So, and now in this case, we're talking about tailings, which is a product of mineral processing.
Yeah.
So, as the ore that comes from underground, goes through a plant, minerals and metals are extracted, and what remains as waste is then, transported through pipelines, into a dam, which is what we call a tailings dam, tailings storage facility. So we manage those dams. So that's the first part of our offering. And one of the important things about tailings management is that we've had in the last few years, the global industry standards on tailings management, which came out of the disaster that we had in Brazil at Brumadinho.
Sure.
And, where a lot of people lost their lives. And out of that, then these standards came into being. So our job is to really advocate through, as an operator of this facility, to make sure that those standards are in place, and working with the owners of those dams, as well as the engineers of record, which are the different consultants who are the independent parties that look at the compliance of those facilities. That is the first offering. This offering of remining, so we basically go, and look at, mine dumps from the past mainly. So mine dumps that have been around for years. I'll just take an example, with the gold mining industry having migrated, used to be a lot of activity around Joburg city, and now it's moved east and west.
Yeah.
And mainly in the west, there's not really much left on the eastern side, on the east end. However, we then go back to those mine dumps because they still have some value in them. And then we use hydraulic remining methods to remine that material and extract gold out of those dumps. And then you take that material, also the tailings from that process then are all taken to one facility, which is properly built, lined and up to standard. So that's what we do as a second offering. The third offering is around water management that we do, which goes from treating water, processed water that is being reused and recycled at operations, to treating sewage water as well. There's projects that we are doing to purify water for human consumption. As you can appreciate, in some of the mining areas, communities are starved of water.
Yeah.
So there's solutions that we are, working on to make water available for communities as well, which might have been impacted, by mining operations. And the last leg main leg of our offering is mineral processing, which is a different division from mine, but where we really focus on beneficiation of coal and processing of material from underground for our clients. Yeah.
Look, how is that? You've done significant strides in this area. How is that really contributed to environmental protection and really resource optimization?
Yeah, so the tailings management portion ensures that we prevent disasters that we've seen. I think the last significant one in South Africa was Jagersfontein, where we unfortunately lost, one life. We ensure those disasters don't happen by being responsible in our management of tailings dams. So we make sure that we, if we manage the tailings dams properly, we prevent those disasters from taking place. But secondly, when it comes to remining, we actually make land available that would have otherwise not been available. Make it available again. We move the material to a plant and then to another tailings dam. and that place becomes available. If you look for a picture of Joburg 20 years ago, or 30, 40 years ago, there would have been a number of tailings dams. But today, most of them, probably 80% of them are gone. And that some of those areas have been recreated into residential areas, some of them are industrial areas. And also just the environmental impact, because when we've got dams close to communities, there's always challenges of dust. Historic ones, there's always challenges of dust, etc., which can become a nuisance for the community. So it contributes to minimize the footprint of mining when we remine these facilities. And the same applies to water. If we can preserve water in our operations, as we do in remining, we recycle a lot of water. We don't really lose much water in the remining process. So we make sure that that water is reused, and you are still able to extract value without wasting a water resource.
Look, with increasing pressure from stakeholders for us to have more sustainability practices, how do organizations do this while maintaining operational efficiency? Because there's cost to these projects, there's cost to going sustainability. How do we balance the two?
Yeah, look, we can't balance them because they are totally different.
Sure.
And if we take the approach to say you balance, it's either or, and that's not the case.
Sure.
We are at a place in the industry where sustainability and ESG is the way to do business.
Absolutely.
And they must be embedded in operations, which means the efficiencies that you need must come from embedded ESG processes. Not to have ESG practices as an add-on. That we continue and we try to get efficiencies, and then let's see that for that annual integrated report we must tick the box also. No, it's not a tick box exercise.
Absolutely.
We need to integrate this practice in how we do business. So if I can give an example, if we talk about minimizing the carbon footprint of a mining operation, it has to start with how we mine, our mining method, what equipment, tools are we using. Then you start at source to start bringing that carbon footprint reduction from there. Things like waste generation, reuse of oil, moving away from probably combustion engines, using electrical equipment underground, etc. So you have to start at source and embed these principles, because without them, it's going to be difficult for the industry to have a sustainable future. So we have to do them. So and find efficiencies while we're doing them. But as an add-on, we're going to get to a point where we'll say it's too expensive to do. And at that stage, the industry is going to fall behind. So we really need to put them and make them as part of the operations. If we say we want to reduce waste generation at a mine, we must do it. We must make sure there's proper sorting, there's no contamination, cross-contamination of waste. And, that's how you get to having a smaller carbon footprint. So it has to be embedded in the operations.
Look, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's where I want you to touch a bit on how do we, because words like sustainability can become a buzzword and easily not be internalized by the people on the ground who need to execute. How do we take these conversations from boardrooms and summits and conferences right down to the people at operations who are actually going to be executing, and perhaps even get better ideas from the people on the ground? How do we integrate this within our systems?
Look, that's an important question. And it's probably one of the biggest challenges the industry is facing. Because, for example, we talk about achieving net zero targets, from the Paris Accord, etc. But you have to get it. You have to get that solution or that strategy broken down into actionable steps that can be implemented at operational level. Otherwise, it's fanagalozolo. Lo muntu kalo mine yenazi yenza fanagalozolo. That's how many people are. So you have to take that strategy must be broken down. And one of the things that in the industry we don't do so well is that sometimes from our strategy sessions as executives in the boardrooms, we've got all these great ideas. We sometimes bring in consultants to advise on what is the right way to go. But after that session, and when we have a strategy document, not enough work is being done to take it back to the mine. Because at mine level, that's where the biggest impact is going to be. If we want a sustainable industry, and I'll just maybe touch on one issue, let's talk about sustainability in terms of our workforce. If you want a workforce that can deliver a sustainable mining industry, then there must be intentional training of people about sustainable practice in mining. There must be intentional training of people about technologies that they need to use. So instead of bringing the technology first, you maybe want to do that by involving the people in the whole process of that innovation. You know, and I know we've gone through processes where sometimes you say, listen, there's a brilliant innovation, we want to bring it on board. Then we often bring, you know, a service provider or a consultant to come to the mine, to come and put something together and do a project. The biggest problem is when they leave.
Yeah.
Because who continues with that project? But because, you know, from the general manager, the mine overseers, you know, the engineering manager, the engineers on the mine, there's not been proper induction also on the benefits of doing things in a sustainable way. You know, people will then revert to default settings. And that sometimes, you know, is the reason why traction on sustainable practices, traction on technology adoption becomes a bit of a challenge. And the other part to that is also the universities as well. You know, over the years, you know, there's not been as robust integration between what we do at universities, what we do at research institutions, and what's happening underground. That gap needs to close.
Sure.
You know, if we really find, you know, a rock engineering technique that helps us to predict a fall of ground, for example, that needs to be tested in a mining environment, needs to be adopted in a mining environment. It must be customized for a mining environment. And then we can look at different mining methods of how do we then roll that out. But there have been some successes. There's great work that the Minerals Council has been doing. There's some best practices that have been developed over the years. So we need to close all these gaps that we've had before. But the people are at the center. Doesn't matter what technology you bring. Doesn't matter what sustainable solution you bring. If the people are not onboarded, are not trained, and you don't get buy-in from the people that work underground, you know, that's where normally things fall apart. And, you know, sometimes people say, but the people in the mines have been here for long. Some of them, they struggle to read and write. You know, I always say, if somebody's been on a mine for 30, 40 years and they can't read and write, we can't blame them. We've had 40 years to teach them, or to at least, you know, help them to get to a point where they can read and write. You know, so it's really a challenge for the industry to translate this buzzword, to translate, you know, this big, you know, corporate language into the language that people understand underground. Translate that into Fanaka law at a deep level gold mine for people to understand. And that's where the difference will come from. Because, by the way, as you said, the people that work in the industry at the lowest level, they often know a lot more about the mining operations than even, you know, some of the senior people on those operations, because they've seen, you know, they've developed some of these mines. Some of them, they've lived their whole lives working for, you know, for those operations. They've seen the challenges. They know what can be done. They know what doesn't work. So you need to take that knowledge, you know, which is, you know, genuine knowledge, and connect that with new innovation. And if you can find a balance between bringing together those two bodies of knowledge together and working with the people, that's where the sweet spot lies.
Look, there is calls to go green. There is the just energy transition that is what South Africa is working on. And at the heart of it is sustainability. What's your thoughts around this, particularly looking at the reality of where South Africa is and the honest climate impact of our mining in South Africa?
Look, that's a contentious one. Look, from a climate change point of view, I think probably in the last few years, there's some consensus that we all need to slow down global warming. So I think that consensus is there, industry-wide. It's developing quite well. In terms of transitioning, you know, I think it always comes back to the needs. Right? You know, I don't think we can really full on and say, listen, let's go green. When you currently don't have enough energy for the majority of the African people. When you currently don't have the infrastructure for the South African masses. Yes, we've had almost over 10 months of no load shedding, etc. But the impact of load shedding in the economy, we are still going to feel it, or that load shedding aside, we're still going to feel it for the next few years coming. So there's a big, you know, energy scarcity in the market. There's a demand for energy. So I think, you know, even before we can, although we need to transition, but I think we need to do the basics first. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to make sure that people have access to energy in Africa. And once we have done that, you know, or as we do that, we can transition. So the transition, you know, I know it's a buzzword as well, just transition. It has to be just, but also contextualized, you know, to every country, to the continent of Africa as well, because I don't think we can move at the rate of developed countries. I don't think we can move at the rate of some of the developed nations or developed continents. So there has to be that space to allow the transition of Africa to take place at its own pace, based on Africa's needs. So that is my view. It has to happen. There's consensus that it needs to happen, but the pace, you know, I mean, you can see it. A good example can be the adoption of EVs, electric vehicles. We've seen accelerated adoption all over the world, you know, in developed economies, but in Africa, it's going to take some time. There's still some school fees we need to pay, you know, basics, you know, healthcare, you know, poverty that we need to eradicate before we can get to a point where people even have a choice of either buying, you know, a combustion engine car or an EV. That is still far-fetched. We still have basic problems, you know, to deal with.
Maketa, how do we give comfort to communities and even carry them into confidence with the amount of work we do to improve our environmental impact? Because, I mean, we still sit with communities that are complaining about the impact that mining has in their towns. And I mean, sometimes you find health issues cited with the work that mining does. How do we carry them into confidence with so much work that is happening and that still needs to be done, just to give comfort and get them to have confidence that some of these things will be resolved? Yeah,
look, the first place to start, in my view, is to understand the root cause of this mistrust.
Sure.
You know, and I'm talking South African context now. You know, and I said earlier that, you know, the legacy of mining South Africa is not covered in glory.
True.
There's some good stories. We've built some of the biggest mining conglomerates in Africa and in the world. There's been big contribution to our GDP, building some of our biggest cities in the country, etc. And also giving, you know, spanning off to other industries. So mining has had that economic impact. But unfortunately, there's not been enough local economic development in areas where mining used to take place, which has led to a lot of mining towns, ghost mining towns. So that's the problem, that the legacy is not good. So there's mistrust already, you know, in areas where, you know, you can go to a Velkom, a Carltonville, you can go to Cullinan, you can go to Kimberley, you can go to Klersdorp, all these historic mining areas, even Witbank, Emalahleni. So all these historic mining areas, there's a mistrust between the mining companies and the communities. So that's where the problem is. So I believe to fix the trust, and by the way, I mean, this is historic. If you look at what companies are doing now, they're doing a lot more than what we've ever done before.
Sure.
So it's not going to, as I said, you're not going to fix a 100-year-old problem overnight.
Yeah.
But we need to just intensify the efforts that, you know, companies are putting it now. And I always say that, you know, mining is not forever. You know, we're mining a finite resource. At some point, it's going to deplete. And my view is that we need to build thriving thriving alternative economies in mining communities. Before the mine arrives in a community, there is some ecosystem in place. You know, it could be a tech shop, it could be a taxi in the community, it could be, Mamzondo and Matuba Khale who are making clothes. So there's some ecosystem that exists there. And I think one of the things that we need to do as an industry is that we should not disrupt those ecosystems.
Yeah.
You know, because normally when mining starts, everybody now aligns to mining. You know, people in the community, everybody wants to do something that the mine can procure. You know, you want to build rooms where people can stay. So everything is mining related, which creates a problem, you know, at the end of that resource, because now what economy is going to be there beyond mining? So we need to sustain those businesses that were there before mining. The second part is that we need to now start, you know, when the mine is in a certain area, we need to create businesses that can outlive mining. And the example I want to make is that sometimes in mining areas, you know, big companies that are service providers to mining would then go and create a depot. You know, so we still have our manufacturing facility in Modderfontein or in Benoni or in Felens in Soweto. And then we have a depot in an area close to mining where the mining takes place.
Sure.
But that investment in a depot and not in a manufacturing plant means that you constantly have movement of logistics. It's another business opportunity,
sure.
But that takes away from actually bringing that service and building something in the community. You know, imagine if you could manufacture a small modular plant that can manufacture tires in the backyard of the mining community, of the mine, and the community is involved, because even when the mine leaves, those tires can still be sold, you know, to other markets.
Sure.
So it's to build that back, we need to really invest in communities, you know, not just do what we've done in the past where we build clinics, and where we build and paint schools and we need things that can outlive mining. I've seen mining companies today investing in water. Those are the kind of projects that can outlive mining. Educating people in the community, training people not just to become suppliers to the mine, our service providers to mine, but to actually become business people that can take their business somewhere else outside of dependence on that particular mine. So that is the second part, to really invest properly in communities. The last part is we need to have honest conversations about these legacy problems, and really take communities into confidence that although this happened in the past, our current ESG-based practices are different, and also understand what the community's needs are. And it's always difficult because in the community you'll have different groupings, but that's where the government must come in, and there must be an alignment between the municipality's plan for the community and what the mine needs to do. And those two plans must now, amalgamate into a thriving community. So the involvement of government. Yes, please.
Yeah, let me come in there.
Yeah.
Why is it that we have not really communicated clearly and contextualized what mining has done in the many years ago, that it's clearly communicated and people get to understand? Because I think in the solutions we give to people and the answers we give, it's what we are doing now. But we never really explain the why part, and people contextualize and appreciate what has happened, the impact it has done, packaged correctly, so that what we are doing today has better context. Why don't we do that?
Look, I think one of the biggest challenges we have as mining people and the mining industry at large, we've over time have not really sold our story very well. Because mining is essential to everyday life. And I always say that if you go to theater to go and watch a play, right? You'll see the final product. You'll see when people are on stage. They won't take you back room to go and see how they're getting everybody ready for the stage, right? In mining, we tend to focus a lot on primary production, and focus on, yes, this is the production, these are the impacts to the environment, but not enough focus has been in the industry on what does our products actually do to make everyday life work, but also, how does it get back into the same community? So we have not sold that story very well, and everybody is interacting with minerals every day. We all have cell phones. The industry is so impactful. You need mining. I mean, even now with the transition, a traditional car, an electric car needs six times more metal than a traditional car, which means you just need to mine more for society to achieve the goals. These goals of net zero, of carbon neutrality and of energy transition need mining. And that's why, in this day and age, we should be advocating to mine more, but do it more responsibly. So the biggest challenge has been the messaging, in my view. And that's why also we are not attracting the young people into the industry. And sometimes young people think mining is old-fashioned, is not as attractive, is not sexy, and they rather go look for a job at a different banking institution, at a law firm, or at a consultancy firm, because mining is not being sold properly. And that's our fault. That's what we need to fix. Because mining is cool. Mining is exciting. It's only mining that can go into a community and create entrepreneurs that become jewelry makers overnight. Only mining can go into a community and leave that community better than before mining. And that is true. But the stories that are dominating the narrative are stories of bad environmental impact, accidents, but the stories of people whose lives have changed because of mining. Stories of communities. There's a famous community or a tribe in the Rustenburg area, who have built, a massive, wealth for the community through mining. And today they've, basically divested from mining into other areas. That community thrives and is quoted as one of the richest tribes in Africa. So there's good stories in mining, but I don't think they're being sold enough. And that's what also creating a bit of a challenge in terms of, do we really need to mine? And people always say, NGOs will come and say, no, mining is bad for the environment. But nobody talks about the good story that mining has to tell. But nobody can do that better than us as mining people. So we need to really sell the industry much better than we've done over the years.
What message would you like to give to mining industry leaders about, the importance of sustainability practices and innovation?
Look, the message from me is that we don't have any other choice.
Absolutely.
We have to really, think about the industry and understand that the industry won't be here forever, but whatever practices we put in place, need to be sustainable, because without sustainability, the industry doesn't have a future. Because sustainability really talks about making sure that whatever we do now, the impact does not rob future generations of prosperity.
Yeah.
So, we have to really intentionally make sure that whatever we do as an industry, we create a future. And, I always believe that all of us here are carrying a baton and we need to hand it over. And at some point, we need to hand over a baton to future generations. They can look back and say, like countries such as, your Dubai's that can say, listen, we use our gold reserve or gold mining or gold industry, our oil industry to go and create prosperity into tourism and so forth. We must have a story that says mining or mineral endowment of Africa has led to this continent that is poverty-free, is more equal, is more inclusive, is more prosperous. There is employment, there is production, there is services, there is economic growth. All these things that you can think of will come from us, taking a sustainable approach. Because without sustainability, there is no future.
Sure. How does mining look like in your eyes in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
So it looks to me more like a Formula One car.
Sure. That
is currently at a pit stop changing tires. I know they take like 5 seconds. Yeah. It might take us longer. So I think we're at a pit stop now from a direction point of view. And we are changing our tires, and we need to take off. There's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of potential. We talk about critical minerals today, and I made a comment at a conference last week that we might have to build 180 mines if we were to achieve our net zero targets by 2030. So the demand for new mines is there. The demand for minerals is there. The demand for critical minerals is there. So how do you translate that demand into inclusive growth? How do you get more young people into the mining value chain? Africa is the youngest continent in the world. 60%, according to the World Economic Forum, 60% of our population in Africa, is less than 25 years of age. So we're a young continent. How do we take advantage of that? How do we learn from other powerhouse economies in the world who have taken their massive population and, became, manufacturing hubs of the world? How do we do that? If one looks at Africa, I was talking about 30% of known reserves, but we're only contributing 5% to global GDP. And mining contributes 5% to Africa's GDP, roughly. So, mining has got potential to make a difference, but we need to bring the young people in.
Yeah.
It's also quoted by the WEF that by 2035, Africa will have a lot more young people entering the workplace than the rest of the world. So how do we take advantage of this, militant battalion of young people that can actually come into the workforce and make a difference? So that is the, where I see us. So we need to leverage on young people and use the young people's potential and untapped potential, to, really propel mining to the future. If you talk South Africa, we have a different context a little bit, because although we are not growing like we used to in the past, but we are seeing a shift. We used to be a gold mining industry. We've seen a shift now towards PGMs. We still hold the world's largest reserves of PGMs. We've seen growth manganese reserves, the world's largest, etc. So we've changed our basket of what we offer the world in terms of minerals. But what we need to do is to leverage on the skills that we've built over the years. There are no better mining people and mining engineers in the world than South Africans. Nobody can operate the mines that we operate in South Africa. And I know sometimes, some countries, and I won't mention them, like to say, we are the best. They are the best at mining. They use technologies, etc., which is good. They've adopted technology faster than us. But in terms of the complexity of our operations, how difficult it is to extract ore in some of our operations in South Africa, that expertise is what is needed, in Africa, in some of the jurisdictions, probably to an extent in the LATAM area, in South America, because those expertise that we have can actually fuel up this growth in mining on the continent and even in other markets. So I think we need to work on that as South Africans. I always say that, it's been said many times that South Africa should be the entry point of mining into the rest of the world. And the continent, investments must come from here and flow to the rest of the continent. I really believe that. I think, we should be, the Silicon Valley of African mining.
Absolutely.
So I think we are taking off. but it's important that we get the basics right. We are sustainable. We are inclusive, and inclusive. I mean in general, communities, young people, women. Everybody around the mining value chain needs to have a seat at the table, and if we do that takeoff, will be nothing like we've ever seen before.
Sure. Makete, thank you so much for your insights. I think it's been truly enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Sure. And all the best to you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Makete's insights remind us that the future of mining lies in our ability to adapt and innovate. Let's all do our part to mine responsibly and ensure a sustainable future. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye and God bless.